Grow Home is a modest game. From its simplistic visuals to its short game length, it can occasionally appear as a game too simple for its own good, but I don't actually think that's the case. From its heavily saturated colors to its physics-based movement system, there's something of a disconnection between what Grow Home is and perhaps what it was expected to be. Ubisoft hardly has much good standing as of 2015. From the numerous downgrades to games being released that are outright broken, or even worse, just the mistreatment of certain beloved franchises, it goes without saying that they're not exactly popular at this point in time. They do have one thing going for them: the Ubi art engine. From Child of Light to Valiant Hearts, these are brisk efforts, but ones met with quite a lot of critical acclaim, and even slightly bigger entries like Rayman Legends and Rayman Origins. These were good games made on a particularly beautiful engine. But Grow Home isn't made with the UbiArt engine. It is instead made with the Unity engine. Initially, this seems like a problem, but if anything, Grow Home is a testament to just how good Unity can be. And as a result, it's a visually stunning game, though a lot of that does fall to the art direction. For as much as certain reputations haven't helped this game, it's off to a fairly stable start. But to go right back to the beginning, it actually starts with one man testing a physics-based movement system. A lot of this stuff is very early in the concept, obviously is not a full game, but it does have a lot of potential. A lot of what's seen here is incredibly interesting. The game opens in this big red starship called Mom, kicks butt out of the plane, tells him there's a planet, there's a star planet, and he's got to get to the top of it. Have a good time! Here's the basics. Bud can move... Is he... Oh, whatever. Well, Bud can move, a little uneasily, but he can move nonetheless. But that's not why I'm here. The main attraction, of course, Bud's beautiful fucking hands. And Bud can grab anything. Rocks, plants, animals, and of course, the environment. Now this shit's been done in a few other places. I saw it in a Flash game a long time ago, but it's never been done so eloquently, and to be honest, it's never been done so convincingly in a 3D environment.
So we experimented with that, gave him props to play with, balls and toys, but very quickly, the most exciting thing we found is that you can grab the actual environment and pull yourself around, and that's how we discovered our climbing mechanics.
This is where Ubisoft has pushed, actually, into the realm of fucking innovation, which is really saying something when it's coming from them who can't. Oh yeah, he can jump too, but that's really not that impressive when he can basically grab and climb everything. Maybe I should have mentioned jumping before the climbing part. Fuck. Bud can also use large flowers to be able to slow his fall, and he can also use very large leaves to be able to glide. The star plant is the main objective of the game. Bud has to grab hold of the star shoots, ride it like a bronco, into these massive green fucking orbs, and eventually the star plant will begin to grow. The star shoots are really cool because they're actually kind of hard to control, and that's part of the fun. There's also an abundance of star shoots in the game. Every star shoot becomes a branch when it's finished being used, and subsequently, other star shoots come from these branches. This means that by the end of the game, there could be hundreds of star shoots shooting out in all different fucking directions. Spell words with it. Uh-oh. That's it though. Those are the fucking basics. And basic they fucking are. I wasn't lying when I said this was a modest game. The true crowning achievement of Grow Home is its physics-based movement system. I say movement, but it could more accurately be described as an animation system, as Bud is, instead of being a standard, normal game character, is actually built more like a skeleton with actual individual bones that move within their own context. When Bud moves, it's less like a normal walking cycle, and instead it appears more like one foot steps forward and the rest of the body just sort of gets pulled into place. As expected, that means momentum is definitely part of this process. If Bud starts running, he'll find it hard to stop himself. And if he reaches an incline, he'll quickly lose his footing and begin to fall completely. At first it can be a little bit difficult to get used to this, but as it goes on it becomes clear that it's actually very fun. It's a true innovation to say the least, and they've really done an amazing job of making it feel like a gelatin robot. As far as momentum is concerned, it feels less like the urban rooftop scrambling of Mirror's Edge, and more like
getting shit-faced in Liberty City, bawling.
As impressive as the movement is in this game, it's only one half. The other half is the interaction, and this is where it gets really special. Plenty of games have allowed for certain interaction and manipulation of objects in the environment.
It's a fine day with you around.
And Grow Home has all of that, and it does it well, but it has one more thing up its sleeve. Using a pair of physical arms to literally traverse the environment by gripping it and climbing upwards is truly incredible and so much fun to play. Ubisoft is no stranger to climbing in video games, but this is something very different. This is a level of interaction that is just so hard to quantify outside of this game. Another reason this works so well is ease of control. L1 manipulates one arm and R1 manipulates the other. It's a very simple technique, but it actually works very much in this game's favor. Ease of control is something that has to be considered. And I should also mention that ease of control does not necessarily equate to an easy game, as this game is kind of difficult to get into at times. It doesn't take long to master, as it is a short game after all, but at the beginning of the game, the freedom of movement can be a little overwhelming. It doesn't last for long, and the value of fun comes in straight away. If there's one thing I perhaps don't like about the movement, it's that it can occasionally feel too slow. The jetpack and the star shoots really do alleviate this though, and I honestly think it's better to have something that's a little bit rough around the edges than something totally perfect, because it's such an original idea. These mechanics really are the true basis of the game, and without them I think they'd really struggle to define this game as anything other than just a 3D platformer. It's such a valuable system, and it adds so much to the game. Bud finds a big red machine. It's the roots in the ground, and then, just like that, he creates his first terminal. The terminal serves Bud's simplistic support network. There are several terminals dotted upwards throughout the map, and they serve two main purposes. One is to be able to teleport between those that have already been found. The other is cataloging plants and wildlife. Whether or not these animals actually want to be scanned is debatable. If Bud just leaves them in the scanner, they have no way of getting down. Feels like the game wants me to collect all these things. It's like it's a checklist. The crystals dotted around the map are Bud's source of upgrades. The first upgrade is the ability to jump, which isn't very impressive, but the second is actually kind of cool. It's the ability to be able to zoom out the camera as if it's like a drone shot. It's actually very cool and does really emphasize the sort of scale of the map. It really shows just how impressive it is that they've managed to fit an entire map all into one area without any loading screens, and it still looks great. Every other upgrade is a form of the jetpack. In the early game, it's just used to cross over certain jumps, make it a bit easier to play the game. But by the end, well, I'll get to that. These upgrades are sprinkled throughout the map, on all the various islands leading upwards, but to be honest, there's only one thing that really stands out about these, and that's how many there are. There's 100. As far as problems, there's not much to talk about here. The game is not very deep mechanically, and I think that kind of works in its favor at times. Grow Home isn't a very long game, and that's probably what helps it out quite a bit. If this game was 10 hours long, it would be kind of miserable near the end, and even at the halfway mark. In the early build footage, there are bases visible, and even small sort of quest lines. I'm not sure why these things were left out, but to be honest, if I had to speculate, it would probably be that it hurts pacing, and that might be a good argument, honestly. In this footage, there are also much larger animals than any that are seen in the game. I imagine this is down to frame rate, as looking down at the end of the game it tends to tank a little bit. Still, it would have been nice to see, as Groholm's biggest problem is a lack of variety. Most of the environment looks the same, and although it's a fairly small environment, it would have gone a long way to really helping this game have a sense of longevity and replayability. And no, I don't think that collecting 100 fucking crystals really counts as adding longevity to the game. I mean, there's nothing that can really damage. The visuals of Groholm are also very strong. Everything has a triangular look to it, and Bud himself is very square. Everything in the world sticks to this mode of thinking, even the clouds, and it's really cool to see such a consistency with a visual basis. The game has some truly great lighting too. Most of the game is set in an outdoor setting, so a lot of it is very bright, especially because this is a tropical paradise. The sky near the end of the game has these beautiful red and purple hues and these tiny little white stars that glisten across the sky. It's really beautiful stuff, and it's clear that they put a lot of effort into making this game visually bright and airy. Bud's eyes light up the darker areas in the game is also very satisfying to look at. It's clear that lighting was really a consideration here, and as much as the art style can be considered basic, it's actually the lighting and the sort of fog effects that really helped this game exceed. This is a very bright game, and many of the colors are heavily saturated. Nothing feels out of place. It's also very neat that all the machinery in the game, from Bud to the starship to the terminals, are all a shade of red, a specific shade of red that isn't seen anywhere else in the game, other than these particular things. It reinforces the alien nature of the planet, but it's also cohesion with a visual style. The whole game is just so sprightly and welcoming, it's really a visual treat. The audio in the game isn't quite as apparent as the visuals are, but it's still very strong and definitely fits the game quite well. Most of the noise comes from Bud, who just makes sort of generic beeps and boops when he runs along the ground. But it's all quite likeable stuff, and every time he jumps there's like even a small grunt. Apart from that though, there's no dialogue in the game really. Even when Mom is talking, none of it's voiced, and to be honest that actually works in its favour.
Even here I get the nag.
A lot of the noise in the game is ambient, and a lot of it is also very understated. Where it does become a little bit more pronounced is when entering sort of underground areas like caves, with the low rumbles and the sort of echoes of Bud's footprints and jumping noises.
What the fuck is that?
As simple as the audio may be, it's very clear that it was considered in every regard. The music in Groholm is a similarly simplistic effort. On the one hand, there's a pretty sprightly main theme that plays throughout and has a few variations. But for most of the game, it is met with one very simple and very effective ambient track, one that plays at a very low frequency. Watching back in recordings, I noticed just how present it is. It's a great piece of music, and even if it is incredibly simple, in fact simple might be the hardest word to use as it's just understating it a little too much, but it's actually a beautiful piece of music. It really fits the sense of the game, from climbing and struggling from the early game to the sort of soaring elegance of the later game. There isn't a single part of the game where it doesn't seem to fit. At first, of witnessing this music, I thought it was a little disappointing that they hadn't gone for something much more similar to the main theme and just had that present. But honestly, this stuck with me a lot longer. This is much better. It's a good piece of music because it perfectly illustrates the tone of the game, and it perpetrates it very well. It keeps that sense of an atmosphere going, something that, as understated as it is, I don't think there's any other piece of music that I could really associate with this game, and if they had tried to do anything different, do not think they would have been nearly as successful. As a result, the music is an achievement, and it just works for the game. After spiraling the star plant into the sky, the end of the game is at hand. As Mom congratulates Bud on successfully completing the mission, Bud is allowed onto the ship for the first time since the game began. It's at this point that I felt a sense of warmth at the game that I had just played. The wall of the cockpit is dotted with concept images and pictures of Bud. I felt a real sense of achievement, and as if the developers themselves were telling me, thanks for playing. This game was their baby.
Don't say it.
And now their baby had grown up. It was a satisfying end with the star plant fully sprouted and Bud back home on his ship. It had really come full circle. But just as it seemed like it was coming to an end, the game asked me to do one last thing. Several star plants were now dotted around the map and needed collecting before we could leave. And, instinctively, I obliged. I collected all the star seeds, and Bud got a well-received holiday.
Only 5 days? Even after all that nag!
I started this all off by saying that Grow Home was a modest game, and in truth, I believe that now. But it's gone in a different direction, I suppose. I say modest and I mean it, but it's honestly a compliment. This game is very consistent. From its visuals, to its soundtrack, to its scale of world, and its likable protagonist, everything about Grow Home seems to fit within its own context, in such a perfect way. This game has a wonderful atmosphere, from barely hanging on in the earlier game, to drifting around space near the end of it. It always feels like a true adventure. It can be tense, but mostly it's very relaxing. Describing this game merely as a climbing simulator might be a little bit crude, but that might be the best way to describe it. Grow Home isn't a difficult game, and it's not a game that's particularly dangerous in any way. It's a joy to play, and it certainly never overstays its welcome. The mechanical basis might be incredible and truly an innovation, but there's one thing I haven't really focused on yet, and that's the protagonist, Bud. Bud has no dialogue, and seemingly no character traits. And yet, despite all that, I found myself oddly enamored with him throughout the whole game. For starters, he seems shit-faced for the duration, but that also means there's a sense of character development there. As I got more comfortable with the game's mechanics, so did Bud. This might seem a little bit obvious, but it's actually kind of interesting. Beginning the game as Bud and ending the game as Bud isn't necessarily two different characters, but it feels like a certain progression, and that's really satisfying to see. It's character development that is done completely through gameplay, none of it through dialogue or story. Bud is one of the reasons why floating around the sky at the end of the game is so impactful, and made it such a memorable experience in my eyes. This game may only be short, but it's engaging the whole time. It's an enjoyable ride, and I'd happily do it again.
You forgot the end.